So, Lee Zeldin that's the administrator of the EPA, just did another interview on Fox News and went into detail, talking about the 1,000 enforcement agents that are taking buyouts, and talking about not enforcing BS EPA rules and only enforcing the rules made by Congress. Clip and then roll the intro.
That they want us to do, and we need to do it exceptionally. But then there are other things where an agency decides to go further. So the Supreme Court, in a decision called Loper-Bright, they overturned something that's called the Chevron doctrine. And what they decided, the Supreme Court decided, is that these agencies can't just decide on their own what they want the law to be. Congress sets the law, the president signs it. What we can't have are bureaucrats deciding on their own that this is what we're going to start doing, and we're going to create rules to back up some agenda that is ours but never passed by Congress. Supreme Court said no, we're not allowed to do it. I respect that. We need to follow the rule of law.
So as you saw in that short clip, it's only a very short clip of the interview. I'm going to go ahead and run the full interview for you guys here. I was actually eating. I had just woken up, heated up some amazing food, and I was watching the interview on Fox. When I saw him coming on, I was like, oh, I have to immediately film this so we can talk about it here. So let's go ahead and run the interview in its entirety, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
I would love to ask you both about the global cuts to personnel across Washington, D.C., and how that affects, how that inspires, how that's driven what you now take over at EPA with, I believe it's essentially some anticipation of 1,000 out of 15,000 employees could soon be cut back.
Well, it's great to be with you. And we have some people who are taking President Trump's fork in the road that allows them to leave and still get paid until the end of September. We also initiated something called a voluntary early retirement, VERA. So some people are deciding to retire early. Others just deciding on their own it's time to go. And then we'll be able to assess those numbers and what the impact is. We have core statutory obligations. Congress sets out that in the Environmental Protection Agency and other agencies have to follow. There is the mission of protecting human health and the environment. Right now, we have responses going on in California, the largest wildfire response in the history of the EPA. Yesterday, I was with Vice President Vance in East Palestine. Later in the week, I'll be in Western North Carolina, where we're involved in that hurricane response. We need the personnel to be able to do the mission. But it's important that we aren't wasting tax dollars, that we also have people who are showing up, being productive and effective. I got one stat earlier today from someone on my team who pointed out after some research, because we're just coming into the building. On Mondays and Fridays, we usually have about 5 to 8% capacity inside of the building. 5 to 8%. And on the best day, maybe that number is closer to a third. We have to get that number way up, and everyone has to return back to work.
Wow. 5 to 8% on Mondays and Fridays. At a high water mark, you hit 30%. This leads to an obvious question for you. You have to fulfill your core mission, as you point out. What percentage of the workforce currently dedicated to the EPA do you find is necessary to executing that mission?
Well, that's exactly what we're working on right now. Is we want to make sure, we have to make sure that we're fulfilling our statutory obligations. Congress has set out all different kinds of things that they want us to do, and we need to do it exceptionally. But then there are other things where an agency decides to go further. So the Supreme Court, in a decision called Loper-Bright, they overturned something that's called the Chevron doctrine. And what they decided, the Supreme Court decided, is that these agencies can't just decide on their own what they want the law to be. Congress sets the law, the president signs it. What we can't have are bureaucrats deciding on their own that this is what we're going to start doing, and we're going to create rules to back up some agenda that is ours but never passed by Congress. Supreme Court said no, we're not allowed to do it. I respect that. We need to follow the rule of law.
Well, and that allows you to focus on your statutory obligations in the stated mission of the EPA, which wouldn't include, I can put up some examples of this, I would assume, would not include the type of money you're spending on climate justice initiatives and so forth. I think we have a running list that we can share with the audience on the types of spending that has probably clouded your mission, including $50 million to New York Immigrant Coalition, $100 million to Indian Collective, and so forth. Advocates as well for open borders receiving money. So tightening up the statutory obligations, tightening up the mission, tightening up the workforce dedicated to executing that mission seems like a great place to start. You mentioned North Carolina, East Palestine, California. I just want to share this. I want to get your reaction. President Trump put this out last night on Truth Social. The water is flowing in California. He said specifically, these once empty half pipes are now brimming with beautiful clean water and heading to farmers throughout the state and to Los Angeles. Too bad they refused to do this during my first term. There would have been no fires. I want to thank the great military and the Army Corps of Engineers for their love of our country and speed in getting this emergency done. You can see, I think we have some video as well we can share of that water flowing. That he posted pictures last night. It's criticized, Lee. It's been criticized by CBS. It's been criticized by other mainstream media outlets like the Los Angeles Times. What do you say about this that was posted and now you can see the images being shared with the water in California?
President Trump made his priority clear, and his purpose was something that was made very clear to Secretary Hegseth and I, and we've been in touch to make sure that we were doing our part to assist. We want to make sure the water is flowing. We also want to make sure that there's access to safe drinking water. This response is big. What's going on in LA right now is the largest wildfire response in the history of the EPA. We want to do a good job. And as you mentioned, the statutory obligations, President Trump wants to make America energy dominant. He wants permitting reform. He wants to make America the AI capital of the world. He wants to bring back American auto jobs. Our agencies, including the EPA, we have to be aware of these economic concerns, these priorities. We need to make those priorities our priorities, and we have to get the job done.
And hopefully with fewer federal personnel than what we've seen over the last, century in the United States of America. Lee Zeldin, always great to see you here. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Will.
All right.
So, what did we learn in this interview? Well, Lee Zeldin was very clear. If it's not a law or a rule that is put forth by Congress, and he said some other very specific things, Congress has to enforce those laws, not the EPA. The EPA cannot arbitrarily create rules and laws. And he specifically cited what? Say it with me. The Chevron decision, in that it was overturned by the Supreme Court. So what does this all mean? Well, it means exactly what I said 2 weeks ago, that the Environmental Protection Agency is more focused on wildfires, chemical spills, natural disasters in North Carolina, and they could give two shits about you in a shop deleting a DEF system. That's exactly what that means. The EPA, and he also talked about this, but didn't wanted to get into specifics, even though that they had already released a statement, which I think caught Lee Zeldin off guard a little bit, because Will Kane kind of asked him about it. But remember, I told you had all of those federal enforcement agents from the Environmental Protection Agency wondering what they were going to do. Could they transfer to another agency? Could they go somewhere else? Could they get a job somewhere else in federal government? And over 76% of those people have now agreed to take a buyout, which will allow them to be paid with benefits by the federal government until September. They are not going to be working moving forward. And that's going to be it. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But this is the big key point here, right? With only like the bureaucratic people at the EPA that are going to work with local and state governments on things like natural disasters and chemical spills and things of that nature, and no arbitrary enforcement agents that the agency didn't have the right to do anyway. I want you to guess on how many shops are going to show up with getting fined or arrested or having their shop shut down because they're doing diesel deletes. 0, not a single one. And in fact, we might not even have an environmental protection agency before the end of this president's term. The 1,000 enforcement agents are just one aspect. You also saw in this interview, he talked about the people that are not coming into the office. They have till February 6th to do that. Anybody that does not show up in the office, and let me be clear for you, a lot of those people that were working remotely moved to states like Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas. Why? Because it was cheaper than living in Washington, D.C., and they would commute. They would fly in 1 or 2 days out of the week to show up at the office and then go home. So they're not going to continue to fly to fly every day to work in D.C. That's not going to happen. Well, TK, what does this mean? Well, to put it plainly, to put it plain and simple, it means this. It means, yes, is there still a Clean Air Act on the books from Congress? Yes, but there's always been that Clean Air Act, and there were still shops doing deletes, people building entire YouTube channels off of building insane trucks that had no diesel emissions. The reason why a lot of that stuff changed was because of the people that were in power that created these arbitrary rules and started fining and going after shops and individuals, right? That comes to a stop today. You're not going to see that. He was very clear about that. He's only going to enforce those things, and that's looking at chemical spills, doing testing, doing things of that nature. And like he said, if Congress wants to enforce any of this other stuff, they would have to enact legislation, and Congress, do you think Congress is going to show up at your diesel shop or at your garage while you're taking off a DPF filter or removing the DEF or the EGR valve off your truck? Do you really believe that? You think Nancy Pelosi's showing up at your house to be like, hey man, you can't do that? It's not going to happen. And like I said, with the stuff that came out from Josh Hawley from Missouri, who's also supporting legislation that's being put forward by a congressman in his state as well, which is to pull back a lot of that, the Clean Air Act, in terms of allowing companies and stuff to do that. The fact that General Motors is asking for federal guidance on, can we remove this active fuel management stuff off of engines, being that they have 877,000 gasoline engines that could just fail because this BS, overpriced, over-engineered crap emission system is literally grenading a bulletproof engine. I'm glad that we're getting back to common sense, guys. That's all I'm going to say. But for everybody else that was in my comments or was saying, like, it's not going to happen, they're not doing that, they're not going to fire those 1,000 enforcement agents, they're gone. They're gone. And come February 6th, if you work in the office and your ass ain't there, whether you relocated to Kansas or Tulsa, Oklahoma, or wherever the hell you moved to, like a lot of these people are crying about, guess what? It doesn't matter. If you don't show up for work, you ain't got a job. So I am glad that the EPA is going in this direction. Sorry, man, this sun is killing me now. I'm glad the EPA is going in this direction, and I am highly looking forward to common sense coming back. But I thought this was interesting. I thought you guys would want to see this, and not just me saying it, but from the horse's mouth of the EPA administrator. And bang, have a nice day. Anyways, Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Give this video a big thumbs up if you like what I do. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And as always, stay petty, my friends.